Hey everybody out there, this is Seto, and today guys we're going to be talking about how did you and how did I get into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh? What got you started in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh? We're going back to your roots today, I guess you could say, during this holiday season. Now originally this video today was actually not even going to be about this topic. Originally I was going to do a ban list video talking about my predictions for the ban list, but I got to thinking about the subject and I was like, you know what? A ban list, everybody's ban list is different all the time. It's a wish list, and Konami's going to do what Konami's going to do regardless of what I say or what somebody else says. They have an agenda, they're going to do it no matter what we think. We have no say in the matter, somewhat. But I decided not to do that video today, and instead I went back to my roots and I decided to talk about how I got in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And tell me down below guys, I love hearing these stories about how people got into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! I've heard some awesome ones before. Some of the main stories I've heard before about how people got into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Was if you got started early on in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! You probably used to watch Pokemon, and you used to watch your Saturday morning cartoons, and you would start watching your Saturday morning cartoons and you would hear about this show called Yu-Gi-Oh! And you would start watching Yu-Gi-Oh! And you would say, and I've heard people say to themselves, that's how they got into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! They watched Pokemon, they were into Pokemon, then they saw the show Yu-Gi-Oh! They watched it, they thought it was cool, and they got into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! That way. Well, the most common one I hear is either a brother or a group of friends at school were playing this card game called Yu-Gi-Oh! And you saw them playing it, and you're like, oh, I want to play with them, and you thought it was a cool game. You didn't know anything about the monsters, and that's how you got in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! So I've heard many different stories, and I love hearing them all the time. But I'm going to talk about today about how I got into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because this is a question I've got asked before, and I'm surprised I've actually never done this on the channel before about how I got into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! So sit back, grab some popcorn, and let's talk about how I, Kevin Rogers, or also known as Seto Kaiba, got into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! So it all started back, I guess you could say, in 2001, I guess you could say, late 2001, and it's a really interesting story. At the time, on a Saturday morning, I was watching my favorite show ever at the time, Pokemon, on Kids WB. I think it was called Kids WB at the time. I can't remember what it's called now. But I was watching my Pokemon show, and they were previewing this new show called Yu-Gi-Oh! I had no idea what a manga was at the time. I had no idea about what a manga anime was, except what I had seen on Toonami at the time. The internet at the time was not really that big. You pretty much back then, you used to get your anime from watching Cartoon Network and watching Toonami every Saturday night, watching the new Dragon Ball Z, Tenchi Muyo, Gundams, Bleach, Sailor Moon, all that stuff back then. That's how you watch it. So I didn't know what anime is. I didn't even know Yu-Gi-Oh! was actually based off an anime series until, based off a manga, or even what a manga was for a couple more years. But that's how I got into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! I watched Pokemon and saw this show Yu-Gi-Oh! And I started watching it. And the first episode, I'll never forget what that first episode was. It was Seto versus Yugi, where Yugi summons Exodia and just obliterates Kaiba and his 3 blue eyes white dragons, and there's that famous picture of Kaiba going, ah, and Yugi going, mind crush. And so that's how I got into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And a couple days later, I was watching some of my friends at school. It was a rainy day and we didn't go outside to play, so we played indoors. And pretty much we stayed indoors, and I saw these guys playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And I saw one of the guys summon Blue Eyes White Dragon. I had any idea what the other monsters were, but I saw him summon Blue Eyes White Dragon, and instantly I was like, you play Yu-Gi-Oh? He's like, yeah man, everybody does around here. I was like, I had no idea. And I asked him where he got this Blue Eyes White Dragon, because I thought it was like the show where there was only 3 original Blue Eyes in the entire world, and I thought in the real world there was only 3 Blue Eyes White Dragons, so I was amazed that this guy had a Blue Eyes White Dragon. I was 11 years old, give me a break. I didn't know anything better at the time. It's an interesting story how we actually got stuck in, because it was a rainy day, but at that time there was a thing called the Beltway Sniper. It was national and world news at the time of this guy had been going around shooting people, and he had like sniped and killed and wounded like 15 people at the end of the day, but they were so scared because he'd been targeting kids in our area that they made us stay inside a lot. And that day it happened to be a rainy day as well. I never forgot it. but we stayed inside for like a month and a half of recess because of what was going on at the time. But that's a different story altogether. So we were inside, and I saw this guy playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And summoned the Blue Eyes White Dragon. And back then, we didn't care how many cards were in the extra deck. We were 11 years old, so we had decks that were like 60 cards, or you would just go to, you know, your local Target, your Walmart, or the gaming store where I went, buy a whole bunch of packs and slap it together and call it a deck. And it had no rhyme or reason. You didn't know what the heck you were doing, just, you know, Blue Eyes White Dragon, Dark Magicians, oh, it has more attack. And at the time, and I think this is one of the big faults of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Show, especially the first season, which was them on Pegasus's Island, was the fact that we all had this conception that to play the card game of Yu-Gi-Oh! You didn't tribute summon, you didn't do all this, you just summoned the monster. We believe that, we didn't even read the card text of Stop Defense, we just went with the anime theme. So it stopped all defensive monsters, and it was a continuous spell card. So, and we didn't tribute, so we were just like, I summoned my Blue Eyes White Dragon, I summoned my Dark Magician, and I attack for game. So that, later on that evening, after I saw my friend playing Yu-Gi-Oh!, I asked my grandmother, who was taking care of me at the time, and my younger brother, who was about, I think, 6 years old, 7 years old, hey, let's go to Toys R Us and try to find these Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. So first I went to 7-Eleven. They didn't have Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, because 7-Eleven back then sold cards back then, and like Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! And that's where I usually got my Pokemon cards and whatnot. But I was young, give me a break. And so instead I went to Toys R Us, because at the time Walmart didn't sell anything. There was no real card shop around my area that sold Yu-Gi-Oh! Products at the time. So we went to Toys R Us, and they had the Yugi and Kyber structure decks, and I was so happy. I was like, yeah! So they had a Dark Magician tin. I remember exactly the tins they had. They had Dark Magician, Summon Skull, Buster Blader, I think was out by then, I don't know, and Blue Eyes White Dragon. My brother got Dark Magician tin. I got I think the Blue Eyes White Dragon tin. Yeah, that's why we did. Yeah, my brother got Dark Magician. I got Blue Eyes White Dragon, and I got 2 Blue Eyes White Dragon structure decks. And my brother got 1 Dark Magician tin, and I got, no, excuse me, I messed up there. My brother got 1 Dark Magician tin, 2 Yugi structure decks. I got 2 Blue Eyes White Dragon structure decks, and 1 Blue Eyes White Dragon tin. And my grandmother was so nice. It was near the holiday season, so she got it for us as a Christmas present. And so I go home, and me and my brother just open up these structure decks, and we just start playing Yu-Gi-Oh! On the floor, learning the basics. We were just going off the anime because it was on. We had it recorded at the time on like the old VHS tape things that you could record in back then. And so we had watched it, and we were like, oh, this is how to play the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because we based it off the TV show. Yeah, we didn't know any better. So that's how I got started. And then I went to my friend's place, and we started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And I had my Dark Magicians. I remember the first monster I ever summoned. What it was. It was Giant Rat. That was the first monster I never forgot, because it got creamed because my friend used to play fusions in his main deck, and he summoned Black Skull Dragon and blew my Giant Rat away. Yeah, that was fun times. When you could play fusion monsters in the main deck. But yep, that is how I got started in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And eventually I learned the rules after a couple of months and learned to play the game mechanics and how it all worked and tribute summon and things like that. But it took me a while to finally understand, and my friends to understand that, hey, this is not... We finally sat down and read that little teeny thin rule book that taught you that the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not based off the anime. It's not like the anime. It's a little bit different. And when Battle City rolled around eventually, we were like, oh, so this is how you play the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! By then, everybody knew how to do it. But yeah, that's how we learned how to play the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! That's how I got into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! So tell me your Yu-Gi-Oh! Story down below. I hope you guys enjoyed this. It was kind of fun reminiscing over the holidays about how I got started in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And until next time, guys, take care, have fun dueling, good luck dueling, and tell me your Yu-Gi-Oh! Story down below, and I always like reading them. And until next time, guys, Seto Kaba, I'm out of here, and good luck dueling to all of you, and have a very merry holidays. Have some good holidays with your family and your friends. Take care, everybody.